get to the New Testament as we talk about the story of the birth of Jesus, but Isaiah is a wonderful place for us to journey through in Advent because Isaiah prepares us. Isaiah shares some good news and some prophetic news as we travel through this journey of Advent. Two of the questions that we ask regularly during this season of Advent is first, what does it mean to us for Christ to have been born into this world? And what does it mean to us individually? What does it mean to us as a church? What does it mean to us as a world? And the other question that we ask during the season of Advent is if indeed there is meaning in the coming of Christ into our world. What is it that we can do this year, maybe even differently from previous years, to prepare ourselves to receive that message and receive that Christ into our lives? Last week we looked at some fairly familiar words that Isaiah has shared. Prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway. We talked about that something indeed is coming. And one of our jobs during this season of Advent is to prepare ourselves and anticipate with excitement and enthusiasm what's coming down the way. Today, Isaiah offers a challenge for us. It is a challenge to us as individuals. It is a challenge to us as a church. The challenge is the how and to whom the good news is to be preached or presented. It's an appropriate challenge for today because in addition to being the second Sunday of Advent, today is also a Power Surge Sunday. You know that once per month, from fall to spring of this year, I'm inviting us to focus on the nature and the purpose of the Church of Jesus Christ. Who are we? What are we called to be? We're doing that in tandem with our church's vision team, who is exploring necessary changes that the church must begin to make in order to be relevant in a very rapidly changing culture. Hopefully along the way in the sermons and in the Power Surge Sundays and in the meetings of the vision team, we all will gain some passion to make those necessary changes and indeed even revitalize this church and this congregation. As Michael Foss says in his book entitled Power Surge, he says, when significant changes are made in the church, something happens. People live consciously as disciples of the risen Christ. And the power of Christ's life surges through the church. And wonderful, graceful, life-giving, life-celebrating things begin to happen. That sounds like good news to me. Does it to you? I'm really asking you that question this morning. Does living as a disciple of Jesus Christ impact your life in wonderful, life-giving, life-celebrating, graceful ways? Because if it doesn't, if you and I do not see a difference in our lives for being disciples, then we are not going to have a lot of good news to share with the world. And if we don't have much good news to share, then Isaiah's words are going to present us with a very big challenge. Remember Isaiah's words that Will read this morning? The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, is upon you. Because the Lord has anointed you. He has sent you to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and release to the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, to comfort all who mourn. These are words that are not just presented by Isaiah for Isaiah. As with all of Scripture, we look to these words as seeing something that God is trying to tell us today. Isaiah certainly shared the words, and the people of Isaiah's time certainly heard them. But we also, in our day and age, hear those words as a challenge. So the task for the mission of the church, of the Christian church, and those of us within the Christian church is to share the good news of Jesus Christ, to be the bearers of good news, and especially at this time of year, to proclaim to all what the coming of Jesus Christ means to our lives and to the world. The difference that it makes that Christ was born. Now I want to remind you this morning that there are some folks who are ready to hear some good news in our world. And they're ready to hear it from the church. Because in addition to the good news that the church has shared for years and years, the church over the years has also shared some really bad news. In his book that the Crossroads folks are studying, When Christians Get It Wrong, Adam Hamilton begins his argument with the research from what's called the Barna Group. The Barna Group concludes in its research that more young adults than ever before are turning away from the church. They see the church as sharing not good news, but bad news. Several books have been written about that research. Hamilton's book is one of them. There's another book called Unchristian, written by Kinnaman and Lyons. And in those books, it's not the theological issues that are explored, but it is the perceptions that non-Christians have of Christians. Here's some findings in some of the research of the Barna Group. Of the surveyed adults, and Jake, bring those up there if you would. Of the surveyed adults who consider themselves outside of the Christian faith, these are non-Christian people, 87% felt that Christians were judgmental. 85% felt that Christians were hypocritical. 75% of those persons felt that Christians were too political. And 91% of those folks felt that Christians were anti-homosexual. Now, those are some pretty powerful findings. Those are some pretty powerful perceptions of what people have of Christians and of the church. And I would guess that most pastors, myself included, would verify these findings simply based on our conversations with young adults today. Hamilton says the sad truth today too often is that some of the most insensitive, critical, judgmental, and mean-spirited people he's known claim to be committed Christians. And of course he tells some stories to kind of back that up, and one of those stories from this book has stuck with me, and I want to share it with you this morning. It's the story of a young man, a youth, a teenager, who described an experience when he was invited to attend a Bring a Friend Day at a local church youth group. This was a large church in a large town, and most of the kids that were part of that youth group never really talked to this boy at school, but when it was Bring a Friend Day, they invited him to come with them. They went to a local water park that day, and he talked with the kids and had some fun, and then they started the long journey back from the water park, and here's his description of that. It didn't start off badly. The rides at the park were fun, and I even enjoyed hanging out with some of them. But during the long ride back to the church, they started talking about people. They discussed who was having sex, who was smoking weed, who was gay. The more they talked, the worse things they said. Many of the people they were talking about were my friends, and they knew it. To make things worse, some of the ones talking loudest were doing the very things they were gossiping about. Finally, they got on to the subject of who was going to hell. It seems that if you didn't go to their brand of church, you didn't stand a chance of getting into heaven. That, of course, meant me. And it didn't seem to matter to them at all that I was sitting right there, soaking all this up. That young man did not experience the good news of the church. That young man very likely turned away from the church. And that's one of our struggles today as a church. Young adults are turning away from the church in droves because they're not hearing anything that really welcomes them. So where does the preaching of this good news then begin? How are we to do it as a church? It doesn't begin with our theology. It doesn't begin with our doctrine. It doesn't even begin with our stance on controversial social issues. It begins primarily with how we treat each other. The respect and the love and the kindness that we share with each other. And with how our church does that, and maybe even organized intentional ways, especially to those who see the church as bearers of bad news instead of good news. Remember again the words of Isaiah. The Lord has anointed us to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and release to the prisoners. That's our job. Foss says that the perception of the church, that the church doesn't embrace outsiders, undermines our credibility. What we need to communicate to those outside the church is radical openness to all, and openness extended from a position of strong, vibrant self-identity as followers of Christ and participants in God's love for the world. So we are the bearer of good news. Let me give you a word of grace this morning in the midst of our confession that often we share bad news instead of good news. In spite of that, in spite of the times that we get it wrong, there are times we get it right. I'm here today because many people along the way got it right. You're here today because folks somewhere along your way, your journey of faith, got it right. Somebody somewhere along the line proclaimed to you the good news of Christ. My guess is they probably did not do it with theology and doctrine, but they did it with kindness and with care. And with respect for who you are and where you were at. I didn't come to the faith because I knew that if I didn't, I was going to go to hell. That's not the way I came to faith. Now maybe you did. And if you did, I want to invite you to rethink that for a moment. I didn't come to the faith because I knew I was perfect, and I wanted to be with a whole bunch of perfect people. And even though I'm right here with a whole bunch of perfect people, I knew that's why I didn't want to come to the faith. I didn't come to the faith because I wanted to pick out somewhere out there and fight this some all-powerful enemy that was destroying Christianity in America, and my job was to save all the godless people in this world. I came to the faith because I heard good news for even someone like me, who doubted, who sinned, who questioned, who didn't have all the answers. And I was told, that's okay. You're welcome. There are folks waiting to hear that good news. I guarantee it. Because they're hearing some other things from the church. And it's not good news. And they're turning away. And there's no better time, really, in all the calendar year than right now to share that good news. We Christians have the attention of the world for these few weeks. We have all of this Christmas stuff at our disposal to say, here's something that means. Next Sunday, we'll share that good news in musical form. We're going to have 30 people up here in celebration singers sharing a wonderful word of good news through music. 2 weeks from now, the children of the church will be up here. They'll be sharing that good news through their drama that they present. That same day, 2 weeks from today, I'll share a message, also in addition to the children's message, and that will begin for me 4 sermons in 8 days that I'm going to share. Sunday the 18th, Wednesday the 21st, Saturday night the 24th, and Sunday morning the 25th. Now I want you to know I am pumped. I get to share the good news of Jesus Christ 4 times. And looking back over my records from past years, I would estimate that I'll probably get to share that with about 300 different people in those 8 days. Some of you, and many people that I don't know. People that come with you, friends, family. People that will come from the community because we're the only ones in this town that offer a Christmas Eve service. I'm going to have an opportunity 4 times to share the message of good news and of welcome and of love for each person. I'm pumped. But here's the best part of it. I'm not going to do it alone. You're going to help me do it. You're going to do it. I'm going to do it orally. I'm going to share some words. And I'm going to do my best to shine my best and do my best at that. But you also are going to be doing that those 8 days. You're going to be doing it in how you treat, in the ways that you treat people, and the invitations you make to people, and the good news, and the modeling you do of what it means to be a Christian, and what it means to be a part of the church, and the good news of that. You're going to do it over 8 of the busiest, most hectic, frantic days of our lives. We are going to be the bearers of good news. In the shopping malls, at the schools, at the factories, at the office, at the restaurant, and yes, at the church. And the way that you and I treat people will either proclaim good news or bad news. And Isaiah says, when you proclaim the good news, there is a possibility with God's help that someone will come to the faith because of you. Something you do, something you say, the attitude you carry, the openness and love that you carry for God's people. Someone along the way may come to faith because of you. And you and I will fulfill Isaiah's words. When Isaiah says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon you, bear that good news to all.